1866. In a southern town that believed the war had ended its problems, the Ku Klux Klan rode openly through black streets, counting bodies, not witnesses. They assumed the men watching from doorways were broken laborers, unarmed, untrained, grateful to still be breathing. They were wrong. By the end of that same week, the Ku Klux Klan had vanished from the town they thought they owned. Horses were found wandering without riders. Deputies refused to answer questions. Court records went silent. 100 black men, all former Union soldiers, were still alive and still standing, while the men who terrorized them were not. The irony was brutal. The Ku Klux Klan's confidence in white supremacy convinced them no resistance was possible. That arrogance sealed their fate. What happened between the first ride and the final silence was never written down. But everyone remembered the result. Before we go any further, comment where in the world you are watching from, and make sure to subscribe because tomorrow's story is one you don't want to miss. The church bells stopped mid-ring. Elias Carter paused on the dusty road, one boot halfway to the next step. His carpenter's tools hung heavy on his shoulder. Sweat traced lines down his neck in the thick evening air. The humidity wrapped around everything like wet cloth. The silence felt wrong. First Baptist had rung evening prayer every night for 3 years. The rhythm marked time in this town like heartbeat. Elias counted 5 seconds. 10. The quiet stretched. Then came the hoofbeats. They rolled through the twilight like distant thunder. Elias turned toward the sound. His body remembered before his mind caught up. Shoulders squared, weight balanced, hands loose at his sides. Torches appeared at the edge of the black quarter. Orange flames cut through the purple dusk. Riders moved in formation, deliberate, organized. White robes glowed in the firelight like ghosts made solid. Pointed hoods turned the men into monsters without faces. The Ku Klux Klan had come. Elias stood perfectly still. He watched them approach with the same cold assessment he'd used watching Confederate positions. 12 riders, maybe 15. Hard to count in the dancing light. They moved with casual confidence. No scouts, no rear guard. They believed no one would resist. They were wrong about that. The lead rider carried a torch high. His horse pranced beneath him. Expensive animal, well fed. The kind a man showed off at county fairs. The rider's boots shone even in firelight. Clean spurs glinted. "Let judgment fall on the wicked," the rider announced. His voice carried across the quiet street. Theatrical, practiced. "Let righteousness cleanse what Reconstruction has corrupted." Elias recognized the horse before the voice. Judge Patterson's gelding. The same man who'd dismissed 3 assault cases last month. Who'd ruled a black man's testimony invalid because recent slaves cannot comprehend the sanctity of oaths. The riders spread out. Mrs. Henderson's house stood 3 doors down from where Elias stood. She took in washing, fed orphans from church, kept a garden that made the whole block smell like tomatoes in summer. 2 riders dismounted at her gate. "Please," Mrs. Henderson appeared on her porch. Her voice shook, but held steady. "I ain't done nothing wrong. Just doing laundry. Just—" The torch touched her roof. Fire caught fast. Hungry. The dry shingles lit up like they'd been waiting. Orange flames climbed toward the darkening sky. Black smoke rolled thick and choking. Mrs. Henderson screamed. Not words, just sound. Raw terror turned into noise. Elias's hands curled into fists. Every muscle in his body coiled tight. His breathing slowed, controlled. The way Sergeant Major Williams had taught him before Vicksburg. Count them. Mark their positions. Wait for the opening. But there was no opening. Not yet. The riders moved down the street. Systematic. They'd planned this. Chosen targets. This wasn't random violence. This was strategy. More houses burned. Families ran into the street. Children cried. Old men tried to salvage belongings from the flames. The Ku Klux Klan riders sat tall in their saddles, watching, savoring. One rider laughed, high-pitched, excited. Elias forced himself to look away, to catalog. Northeast corner, 3 riders blocking the main road. Southwest, 2 more cutting off the path to town. They'd boxed in the quarter, trapped everyone inside their own neighborhood. Professional work, military thinking. The formation moved toward the schoolhouse. Sarah Whitcomb stood on the steps, 23 years old, educated at a freedmen's school in Nashville. She'd taught reading to 40 children in a building that used to be a tobacco barn. She wore a simple cotton dress. Her hands shook, but she didn't run. "The school is legal," she said. Clear voice, despite the fear. "Federal authority approved." The whip cut her words short. Leather cracked across her shoulders. She stumbled, caught herself on the railing. Another strike tore through her dress, drew blood. Elias took 1 step forward. A hand caught his arm. "Not yet." The voice was barely a whisper. Caleb Moore stood beside him, another veteran, former sharpshooter. His jaw worked like he was chewing rocks. "Not yet." The whipping continued. 5 strikes. 10. Sarah collapsed on the steps. The rider with the whip coiled the leather slowly, taking his time, making sure everyone watched. "Let this be instruction," the rider announced. "Education makes them forget their place. Forget what they are. Forget what they'll always be." He kicked Sarah down the steps. She rolled, landed hard in the dirt, didn't move. Across the street, Isaiah Bell stood frozen in his doorway. Former sapper, engineer, the kind of man who could collapse a bridge or build fortifications from nothing. His hands gripped the doorframe so hard his knuckles went pale. Near the burning houses, Thomas Reed helped an elderly woman away from the flames. Former intelligence runner. He moved carefully, watched the riders from the corner of his eye. Recording, remembering. The Ku Klux Klan riders regrouped in the street. "This town belongs to us," the lead rider declared. "Reconstruction is a federal lie. We are the law here. We are justice. Remember this night when you consider stepping above your station." They rode slowly through the smoke, unhurried, confident. The hoofbeats faded toward the white side of town. Silence rushed back in. Then came the sounds underneath. Crying, coughing, flames consuming wood. Mrs. Henderson sobbing over her ruined home. Elias walked to the schoolhouse. Sarah breathed shallowly. Blood soaked through her dress. Her eyes were closed, but she was alive. Another woman, Clara Jenkins, rushed over with clean cloth, started tending the wounds with shaking hands. Elias climbed the schoolhouse steps, looked inside. They'd smashed the desks, torn up books, scattered slates across the floor. Careful destruction. Methodical. The same way armies destroyed supply depots. He recognized the tactics. Intimidation through spectacle. Destroy symbols of progress. Make resistance seem impossible. Break the will before breaking the body. He'd seen Confederates try the same thing. Burning contraband camps. Whipping escaped slaves in front of Union lines. Trying to prove that freedom was temporary, that the old order would return. It hadn't worked then either. Movement caught his eye. Across the street, Caleb gave the smallest nod. 2 buildings down, Isaiah did the same. Thomas Reed stood near the well, meeting Elias's gaze for just a moment before looking away. The nods meant something. Recognition. Understanding. They'd all seen this before. They'd all fought it before. Elias knelt beside the destroyed schoolhouse, touched the splintered wood. His mind calculated automatically. 12 riders, maybe 15. Predictable patrol pattern. Overconfident. No real military discipline despite the formation. Beatable. The night stretched toward midnight. Smoke hung in the humid air. The Ku Klux Klan would ride out before dawn. Return to their respectable lives. Merchants, landowners, judges. They'd remove the robes and pretend they'd been home sleepin'. But Elias would remember their horses, their voices, the way they moved. He stood slowly, looked at the burned homes, the wounded teacher, the terrified families. The war wasn't over. It had just come home. Dawn broke over smoke and ash. Elias hadn't slept. None of them had. The night stretched into morning with the taste of char in every breath. Mrs. Henderson sat on the ground near her destroyed home, staring at nothing. Sarah Whitcomb lay in Clara Jenkins's house, fevered and still. The bell at New Hope Church rang once, clear, deliberate, not a call to prayer, a summons. Elias walked through streets that smelled like defeat. Families picked through rubble with empty eyes. Children asked questions no one could answer. The morning sun felt like mockery, bright and clean over a world covered in soot. New Hope stood at the edge of the quarter. Small building, plain wood. The congregation had built it themselves 3 years back, when freedom was new enough to taste like possibility. Now it served a different purpose. Men gathered in silence. They came alone or in pairs, moved quietly. No rushing, no obvious urgency, just steady movement toward the church doors. Elias counted them as he walked. Recognized faces, former soldiers, all of them. The way they held themselves gave it away. Straight backs, careful eyes, hands that stayed loose and ready. Inside, the church was packed. Wooden pews creaked under weight. Men stood along the walls when seats ran out. The air hung thick and close. Sweat mixed with smoke smell. Morning light filtered through simple windows, painting everything in shades of amber. Elias found a space near the back, scanned the room with old habits. 60 men visible from where he stood. More in the side room. His mind catalogued automatically. Ages, builds, the way they positioned themselves with clear sightlines to doors. Reverend Solomon Price stood at the pulpit, 70 years old, with hands gnarled from field work, and a voice that carried like thunder when he wanted it to. He'd been born, enslaved, freed himself by walking away during the chaos of war. Never looked back. "Brothers," Solomon said quietly, "let us pray." Every head bowed. Not for show. Real prayer. Desperate prayer. The kind that came from watching your world burn and knowing more flames waited. "Lord, we ask for strength." Solomon's voice roughened. "We ask for wisdom. We ask for justice that law won't give us. We ask for protection that no federal authority can provide. We ask—" He stopped, drew breath. "We ask for what we've always had to take ourselves." "Amen," the room responded, low, unified. Solomon looked up, met Elias's eyes across the crowded space. Something passed between them. Understanding. Permission. "I think," Solomon said carefully, "we need to speak plainly about who we are, what we've been, what we can be again." Murmurs of agreement. "This room holds exactly 100 men," Solomon continued. "Some of you served in the 54th Massachusetts, some in the 5th Colored Infantry, the 108th, the 62nd. Different regiments, same war." Men shifted, recognition spreading through the crowd like current. "Maybe," Solomon said, "we should remember what we learned, what we can do when we work together." Caleb Moore stood from a middle pew, former sharpshooter, Company E, 54th Massachusetts. "Sergeant Elias Carter is in this room," he said loud enough for everyone to hear. "Man led 23 missions behind enemy lines. Never lost a soldier he didn't choose to lose." Heads turned. Elias felt the weight of attention settle on him. Heavy. Expected. He'd known this moment was coming since he'd knelt beside that schoolhouse. He stood slowly. "I was a sergeant," Elias said. Clear voice. Parade ground volume. "Not anymore." "That war ended." "Did it?" Isaiah Bell called from the left side. "Former sapper, 108th Colored Infantry. Because last night felt like Georgia in '64. Same tactics, same terror." Just different robes. Agreement rumbled through the room. Thomas Reed rose, intelligence runner. He'd carried messages through Confederate territory for 2 years without getting caught once. We need organization. Need to know what we have. Who we are. Then let's know, Elias said. It started simply. Men called out their units, their roles. The room became a roll call of war. 5th Colored Infantry, Rifleman. 62nd Regiment, Scout. 54th Massachusetts, Corporal, Company B. 108th, Sapper. The voices overlapped, built on each other. 100 men accounting for themselves. Elias listened to every word, filed it away. His mind worked like it used to, organizing soldiers into units, skills into strategy, individuals into something larger. Former corporals, sergeants, scouts, engineers, sharpshooters, infantrymen, medical orderlies, supply sergeants, men who'd fought at Fort Wagner, Petersburg, Nashville, Vicksburg, men who'd survived battles that broke veteran white regiments. When the last voice faded, silence held for 3 heartbeats. 100, Elias said. Trained, experienced, still here, still dangerous, Caleb added quietly. Elias moved to the front. Men parted to let him through. He stood beside Solomon at the pulpit, looking out at faces he'd worked alongside, eaten with, trusted with his life. They'll come back, Elias said. Maybe not tonight, maybe not this week, but they'll come. Last night was a test. They'll keep testing until we break or disappear. No one argued. We have choices, Elias continued. Run, hide, hope federal law protects us. He paused. Let the bitter laughter ripple through the room. Or we remember what we are, what we can do. What are you suggesting? Someone asked from the back. Preparation, Elias said carefully. Defense. Organization. You mean weapons? Isaiah said bluntly. I mean being ready. Thomas Reed stood again. Some of us kept things. From the war. Just in case. Me too, another voice called. Same. Got a rifle buried under my barn. The admissions cascaded. Rifles, pistols, ammunition, bayonets, equipment that was supposed to be surrendered but somehow wasn't. Tools hidden away against future need. Elias wasn't surprised. He'd kept his service revolver too. Cleaned it every month. Never forgotten how to use it. We need inventory, Elias said. Need to know what we have, what we need, what's possible. Need to know if we're really doing this, an older man said. Former private. His voice shook. If we fight back, really fight, they'll bring hell down on us. Might bring the army. Might burn the whole quarter. Truth settled over the room like weight. They're already bringing hell, Caleb said. Just calling it law. And if we do nothing, Isaiah added, we're teaching our children that freedom means cowering, that fighting for this country earned us the right to be whipped in the street. I'm not suggesting we attack anyone, Elias said. Careful words, important distinction. I'm suggesting we defend ourselves, properly, with discipline and coordination, the way we were trained. Solomon spoke up. The way soldiers defend territory they hold. Yes, Elias agreed. The vote happened without words, men meeting eyes, small nods, shoulders straightening. The room shifted from grief to something harder, something with edges. We'll need time to prepare, Elias said. Tonight we gather information, inventory weapons, identify positions. Tomorrow we drill, quietly. Nothing obvious. Just men working together like we used to. And when they come back, someone asked, we'll be ready. Plans formed quickly. Former sergeants took responsibility for organizing their sections. Isaiah would assess defensive positions. Thomas would gather intelligence on Ku Klux Klan movements. Caleb would coordinate weapon distribution. Others volunteered for specific roles: communications, supply, medical support. Military structure rebuilt itself in minutes. Muscle memory of command and organization. These men had done this before. Built armies from chaos. Created order from desperation. They discussed signals, adapted battlefield communication for town streets. Church bells meant gather. Specific patterns indicated threat levels. Lanterns in windows marked safe houses. Hand signals from the war still worked fine for close coordination. Nothing obvious, Elias reminded them. We're carpenters and porters and farmers. We work. We pray. We live quietly. Until we don't. The meeting ended as the sun climbed higher. Men filed out in small groups. Casual departures. Nothing to draw attention. They'd meet again after dark. Compare notes. Refine plans. Elias stood on the church steps, watching them disperse. Caleb paused beside him. You know this might not work, Caleb said quietly. I know. Might get people killed. Already are getting killed. Just slower. More polite. Caleb nodded, walked away. Elias looked at the street. Burned homes still smoldering. Families beginning the work of rebuilding. Children playing in ash. All of it fragile, temporary, built on hope that law would protect them, that federal authority meant something, that freedom was permanent. But he'd learned different. Freedom wasn't granted. It was taken, held, defended. The afternoon stretched toward evening. Elias went to work like normal, picked up his tools, fixed Mrs. Henderson's porch rail, one of the few things that survived the fire. His hands worked automatically, while his mind calculated angles, positions, timing. Sunset painted the sky orange and red, the same colors as flames, the same colors as blood. Men began moving through the twilight, quiet movement. Purpose without haste. Elias cleaned his tools, set them aside, felt the weight of his service revolver under his shirt. 44 caliber, well-maintained, loaded. 100 men. One town. One chance to prove that the war hadn't been for nothing. He walked toward New Hope Church as darkness fell. Midnight came quiet. Elias stood in the shadow of the church tower, watching the road. Around him, invisible in darkness, 99 other men waited. Not clustered, positioned. Former soldiers who remembered how to use terrain, how to read movement, how to wait. Isaiah had chosen the positions carefully. Buildings offering cover, alleys providing escape routes, rooftops for observation. The Black Quarter had become a grid of overlapping fields of fire and coordinated choke points. Nothing showed. No obvious preparation. Just a sleeping neighborhood. Except it wasn't sleeping. Caleb appeared beside Elias. Silent approach. Scout training. Thomas says they're moving. Maybe 20 riders. Coming from the Western Road. Same as last time? Same route. Same confidence. Elias nodded. Predictable. The Ku Klux Klan relied on terror, not tactics. They expected fear to do most of their work. Pass the signal, Elias said. Caleb disappeared. 3 minutes later, a lantern flickered in a second-story window. Specific pattern. Church bells remained silent. Those were for gathering, not fighting. But men saw the light, shifted into final positions. Elias checked his revolver. 6 rounds. He had 18 more in his pocket. Probably wouldn't need them. This wasn't about killing. It was about breaking. The sound came first. Hoofbeats. Multiple horses moving fast. Then torches appeared on the Western Road. Orange flames cutting through darkness. 20 riders, maybe more. White robes, ghostly in firelight. They rode straight toward the church. Same target as before. Confident. Loud. Someone was whooping. Another singing. They expected nothing but locked doors and terrified families. The Ku Klux Klan entered the main street. Isaiah's team moved first. They'd positioned themselves in the stable behind the church. Former cavalry scouts who knew horses better than most riders. They'd prepared carefully, gathered materials, practiced timing. The first explosion wasn't large, just a loud crack followed by bright flash. Firework powder in a tin can. Simple, effective. Horses screamed. 3 animals reared immediately. One threw its rider. Another bolted sideways, crashing into two more horses. The formation collapsed into confusion. Second explosion. Third, positioned to create maximum chaos. Not dangerous, just loud and bright, and completely unexpected. The Ku Klux Klan tried to control their mounts, shouting, cursing. Some managed to stay horsed. Others hit the ground hard. That's when Elias's teams moved. They came from doorways, alleys, shadows, not running, moving with purpose. 40 men, coordinated like infantry advancing through contested ground. They'd drilled this, adapted battlefield maneuvers for street fighting. The first Ku Klux Klan member to get dragged off his horse never saw it coming. Two former soldiers grabbed him from opposite sides. Clean technique. One controlled the arms, the other the legs. The man hit dirt hard. His hood came off, showing a young face, maybe 25, eyes wide with shock. "Stay down," someone said. Calm voice, command voice. The rider stayed down. It happened fast after that. Disciplined violence, not rage, not revenge, just trained men executing practiced movements. A Ku Klux Klan rider tried to swing a club. Caleb intercepted. Former boxer from Company E. He stepped inside the swing, controlled the arm, used the rider's own momentum to pull him sideways off the horse. The club fell. The rider followed. Another tried to draw a pistol. Thomas was faster. Former intelligence runner with reflexes sharpened by 2 years of avoiding Confederate patrols. He grabbed the gun hand, twisted, applied pressure to specific points. The pistol dropped. The rider screamed. "Broken wrist," Thomas said conversationally. Could have been worse. Horses scattered. Some riders tried to flee immediately. They discovered the problem with the western road. It funneled. And Isaiah's secondary team had positioned themselves at the choke point. More men appeared, blocking retreat, not attacking yet, just standing there, solid, immovable. The Ku Klux Klan, who'd stayed mounted, tried to charge through. Bad decision. Former infantry knew how to stop cavalry charges. You didn't meet them head-on. You deflected, redirected, used their momentum against them. Ropes appeared across the road. Not high, ankle height on the horses, invisible in darkness until too late. 2 horses went down. Riders flew. One landed badly, stayed down holding his leg. The other tried to run. Made it 5 steps before 3 soldiers converged. Clean tackle. Professional. The kind that ended fights without unnecessary damage. Within 4 minutes, the attack was over. 15 Ku Klux Klan members on the ground. Disarmed, hoods removed. 5 escaped on horses too spooked to control. The rest of their animals had scattered or been secured. No one dead. Several injured, broken bones, sprains, bruises. Nothing fatal. That was intentional. Elias had been clear. This wasn't execution. It was demonstration. The captured men sat in the church square, surrounded. Young faces, mostly. Some familiar. Sons of shopkeepers, farm hands, a deputy's nephew. Terror replaced their earlier confidence. They'd ridden expecting to inflict fear. Now they wore it. "Tie them," Elias ordered. "Nothing tight, just secure." Former soldiers produced rope. Efficient knots. No cruelty. Just competence. One Ku Klux Klan member tried to threaten. "You don't know what you've done. There'll be hell." "Quiet," Caleb said. Not loud. Just final. The man went quiet. Dawn came slow. Gray light revealing the scene. Scattered torches extinguished. Captured riders sitting in dirt. Black men standing guard with the calm discipline of soldiers who'd faced actual combat and found this lacking. Federal troops arrived an hour after sunrise. 10 cavalry soldiers led by a lieutenant who looked barely old enough to shave. He stared at the scene. Captured Ku Klux Klan members, organized defenders, no bodies, complete control. "What happened here?" the lieutenant asked. "Defense," Elias said simply. "They attacked. We stopped them." The lieutenant walked the perimeter. examined the prisoners, noted the lack of fatalities, the restraint, the organization. "You're all former soldiers," he said. Not a question. "Yes, sir. You coordinated this. We defended our homes, sir, with discipline. No excessive force, no lynching, just defense." The lieutenant looked at the Ku Klux Klan members, then at the standing soldiers. Something shifted in his expression. Not quite approval, but understanding. "Federal authority appreciates those who maintain order," he said carefully, "especially when that order prevents bloodshed." He ordered his troops to collect the prisoners, take them for processing. Implied charges might follow. Implied federal protection might exist. The cavalry rode out by mid-morning. Families emerged cautiously. Saw the captured Ku Klux Klan being led away. Saw their defenders standing unharmed. Celebration started small. Grateful tears, quiet thank yous. Then grew. Children shouted. Women embraced their husbands. Men who'd hidden during the attack now stood taller. Ashamed, they'd doubted. Hope exploded through the quarter like sunrise. Breakfast became a community feast. Food appeared from everywhere. Tables in the street. Laughter. Songs. Someone started playing harmonica. Children danced. Elias watched from the church steps. Caleb stood beside him. Thomas. Isaiah. The planning team that had made it work. "They think it's over," Thomas said quietly. "It's not," Elias replied. They'd kept one Ku Klux Klan member separate. Young man named Dale Pritchard, son of the mill owner, 19 years old, frightened. Elias led him to the church basement while celebration continued outside. Sat him in a chair. Stood across from him without speaking. Just waited. Dale broke in 3 minutes. "It's not just us," he said. Words tumbling out desperate and fast. "The chapter here, we're nothing. When they find out what happened, when they hear we got beaten." "Who?" Elias asked. "State leadership. Real leadership. They'll come. Not 20 riders. Hundreds. They'll make an example. Federal troops won't matter. Law won't matter. They'll burn everything." Elias felt cold settle in his chest. "When?" "Soon. Week, maybe. They'll bring militia. Deputized men. Legal authority. You won't be defending anymore. You'll be criminals." The celebration outside continued. Joyful noise. Innocent belief that victory was permanent. But Elias heard different. He heard the truth. Dale didn't mean to speak. They hadn't ended anything. They'd declared war. The celebration outside the church reached its peak just before noon. Children running, adults dancing. Someone had brought out a fiddle. Music filled the air with defiant joy. Elias stood in the basement with Dale Pritchard still trembling in his chair. Caleb had joined them. Then Thomas. Isaiah arrived last, shutting the door against the noise above. "Tell them," Elias said to Dale. The young man repeated everything. State leadership. Hundreds of riders. Legal authority. His voice shook, but the words stayed consistent. Truth had a specific sound. This was it. Thomas leaned against the wall. "Federal lieutenant implied protection. Federal lieutenant is 20 years old," Caleb said. "Commands 10 men. Probably gets orders from someone who doesn't care what happens here." "They praised us," Isaiah added, "for maintaining order, preventing bloodshed. That praise won't last when politicians get involved." Elias studied Dale. "Who gives orders locally? Real orders, not Ku Klux Klan theater." Dale hesitated. Fear warred with self-preservation. Self-preservation won. "Sheriff Pollard," he said quietly, "and Judge Griggs. They coordinate everything. Make it legal. The Ku Klux Klan rides, but they decide when and where. They provide cover." "Cover how?" Elias asked. "Deputizations, warrants, arrests. Anyone fights back, they're criminals. Anyone defends themselves, they're insurrectionists. The law becomes—" Dale stopped, searching for words. "A noose," Thomas finished. Dale nodded miserably. Elias absorbed this. Sheriff Henry Pollard, polite man, always called Elias Mr. in public, smiled at children, maintained order during the day, professional lawman who'd worked in the county for 15 years, and Judge Samuel Griggs, cold-eyed man who'd presided over Reconstruction courts with precise fairness, had actually ruled in favor of black plaintiffs twice, quoted scripture about justice, wore respectability like armor, both aligned with the Ku Klux Klan. "Let him go," Elias said. Dale stared. "What?" "You heard me. Walk out. Go home. Tell anyone who asks that we questioned you and released you unharmed. They'll know I talked. Then don't tell them you talked. Say we threatened you into silence. Say whatever keeps you breathing. I don't care. Get out." Dale ran, footsteps echoing up the stairs, door slamming. "Why release him?" Isaiah asked. "Because keeping him makes us kidnappers. Hurting him makes us criminals. We need to stay clean as long as possible." Caleb nodded slowly. "Before they make being alive illegal." Elias gathered the other leaders 2 hours later. Not the full 100. Just the men who'd commanded units during the war. 15 former sergeants, corporals, and 1 lieutenant who'd earned his rank at Fort Wagner. They met in the church proper while families celebrated outside. Contrast was deliberate. Let people have their joy while leadership faced reality. Sheriff and judge are compromised. Elias began. No preamble, just facts. State Ku Klux Klan leadership will respond to our victory. They'll come with legal authority, militias, deputized riders. Former Lieutenant Marcus Washington spoke first. Educated man. Had studied law before the war. Deputized militia operates under state authority, Marcus said. Federal troops can't interfere without direct orders, and those orders won't come. Reconstruction is failing in Washington. Politics shifting. Protection is evaporating. How long until they mobilize? Someone asked. Week. Maybe less. Depends how fast word spreads. Elias laid out what they knew. Pollard controlled law enforcement across 3 counties. Griggs controlled courts. Together they could deputize hundreds of white men, provide legal cover for violence, and prosecute any black resistance as criminal insurrection. "We defended ourselves last night," Marcus said carefully. "Legally defensible. But if they come with badges and warrants, defense becomes rebellion." The weight of that settled over the room. "What are our options?" Caleb asked. Marcus counted on his fingers. 1. Flee. Leave the county. Abandon homes, but survive. 2. Submit. Accept whatever they do and hope for mercy. 3. Fight. Become what they'll call us anyway. "There's a 4th option," Thomas said. "Appeal to federal authority, formally. Document everything. Request protection." "Already tried that," Isaiah said. "Remember? Federal investigator came last year after the first Ku Klux Klan activity. Made arrests. Then got recalled. Charges dropped. That investigator probably got reassigned to somewhere politics matter." Silence followed. Not hopeless, just realistic. Elias walked to the window. Outside, families danced. Children played. Old women sat in the sun, smiling. Yesterday, they'd lived in terror. Today, they believed in safety. Tomorrow. "We fortify," Elias said. Heads turned. "Fortify what?" Marcus asked. "Everything. Defensive positions, escape routes, supply caches, intelligence networks. We prepare like we're defending territory during war. Because we are." "That's preparing to fight," someone said. "No. That's preparing to survive. Fighting is one option. Running is another. Negotiating is a third. But all of them require preparation." The logic was military. Practical. Several men nodded. "We need information," Caleb said. "Real information. Who's joining militias? What Pollard and Griggs are planning. When state leadership arrives." "I can help there," Thomas offered. "Still have contacts. White folks who owe favors. Some who might actually care. Carefully, Elias warned. Anyone you approach becomes a risk. They organized quickly. Former soldiers knew how to structure command. Defensive teams, intelligence gathering, supply management, communications protocols, family evacuation plans. It took 3 hours to sketch the framework. The celebration outside was winding down when they finished. Sun dropping toward the horizon. Golden light, painting everything beautiful and fragile. Elias stood outside the church as families headed home. Children tired from playing. Adults carrying leftover food. Laughter softer now, but still present. Sarah Whitcomb approached. The school teacher who'd been whipped 2 nights ago. Bruises still visible on her face, but eyes bright. "Thank you," she said, "for protecting us, for showing them we won't be terrorized." Elias nodded, couldn't find words. The children asked if they could return to school. Sarah continued, "I said yes, tomorrow, because we're safe now. Because men like you made us safe." She walked away before Elias could respond. Caleb appeared beside him. "You didn't correct her." "No, because she needs to believe it. Because she deserves one night of peace." The sun touched the horizon. Sunset bleeding red across the sky. Beautiful and ominous. Thomas joined them. Then Isaiah. Then Marcus. The leadership team standing together watching darkness approach. "We're a target now," Marcus said quietly. "Biggest target in the state. They can't let this victory stand. Can't let other towns get ideas. Can't let black soldiers think they can defend themselves successfully. We gave them no choice but to crush us," Thomas added. Elias watched families disappear into homes, watched lanterns light in windows, watched the community settle into evening routines with something they hadn't felt in months. Hope. Dangerous, precious, probably temporary hope. "We won last night," Elias said. "Won completely. Humiliated them. Proved we could fight. That victory." He stopped. The truth too heavy for simple words. Caleb finished for him. "That victory made us everything they fear. Made us proof that we're not helpless. That we're not afraid. That we remember how to be soldiers. Made us the example that has to be destroyed," Isaiah said. Full darkness arrived. Stars emerging. The same stars that had watched over battlefields and burial grounds. The same stars that would watch whatever came next. Elias felt the weight settle. Not despair. Just clarity. They'd won a battle. Saved lives. Protected their community. Done everything right. And that victory had painted a target so bright that even distant eyes could see it. The church basement transformed after dark. Tools emerged from hidden corners. Weapons that hadn't been touched since the war appeared wrapped in oilcloth. Men who'd spent the day celebrating now moved with military precision. Elias divided them into teams: defense, intelligence, logistics, communication. Each group understood their purpose without lengthy explanation. They'd done this before, just different terrain. "Northeast perimeter needs eyes," Caleb said, sketching on rough paper. 3 approaches from that direction. Roads visible from Miller's barn if we position someone in the loft. "Miller won't allow it," someone said. "Miller will if we explain properly," Thomas replied. His daughter married Isaiah's cousin. Family connections matter. The planning continued. Escape routes identified. Rally points established. Code words agreed upon. Everything verbal. Nothing written that could be found. Isaiah brought inventory. 18 rifles. Maybe 30 pistols. Ammunition varies. Powder enough for sustained defense, but not prolonged siege. "We're not planning siege," Elias said. "We're planning survival. Survival might require siege," Caleb countered. The moral tension that had simmered all day finally surfaced. "We need to discuss what we're actually doing," Marcus said, "because fortification implies defense. Defense implies expecting attack. Expecting attack means we believe conflict is inevitable. Conflict is inevitable, Caleb said flatly. Dale Pritchard told us that. State leadership is mobilizing. Sheriff and judge provide legal cover. Math isn't complicated, but our response determines whether we're victims defending themselves or insurrectionists, Marcus argued. Law matters. Perception matters. Law died when the judge started coordinating with night riders, Caleb shot back. Perception died when they whipped Sarah in the street. Elias let them argue, needed to hear both sides articulated. We fought last night in immediate defense, Marcus continued. Clear self-defense, legally justifiable. But if we prepare fortifications, cache weapons, organize military command, that's premeditation. That's conspiracy. That makes us criminals before they even attack. We're already criminals to them, Caleb said. We're black. We're armed. We're organized. We won. Every single one of those facts makes us criminals in their eyes. Legal protection is fantasy. Legal protection is strategy, Marcus countered. Federal authority still exists. Reconstruction law still exists. If we document everything properly, maintain defensive posture, avoid provocation, Caleb's voice rose. They burned homes. They whipped a school teacher. They've been provoking us for months, years, decades. When do we stop worrying about provocation? Elias raised his hand. Silence fell. Both arguments have merit, he said carefully. Marcus is right that law provides cover. Documentation matters. Federal authority might respond if we create paper trails that can't be ignored. But Caleb is right that law becomes weaponized when authorities are compromised. We can't rely on protection that doesn't exist. So what do? Isaiah asked. Both. We prepare like soldiers because we are soldiers. We document like lawyers because law still matters. We defend ourselves because survival isn't negotiable. But we stay clean. No provocation. No aggression. No first strikes. We become exactly what they claim we can't be. Disciplined, lawful, and stronger than they expect. The room absorbed this. Tension eased slightly. How do we stay clean while preparing for war? Someone asked. By understanding the difference, Elias said. Defense isn't aggression. Readiness isn't attack. Organization isn't conspiracy. We're citizens protecting our homes. That's legal. That's righteous. That's American as hell. Caleb smiled grimly. Even when those homes are black. Especially then. Training began near midnight. Not combat drills. Those would attract attention. Instead, they practiced signals. Hand gestures meaning danger, rally, disperse, hold position. Simple communication that could save lives. Older men taught younger ones. Veterans who'd survived Shiloh and Petersburg shared lessons learned in blood. How to move quietly. How to watch without being seen. How to recognize ambushed terrain. Not because they wanted war, because war might come regardless of wanting. Families hid valuables separately, not together in obvious places, spread throughout the community. Marriage certificates buried near wells. Family Bibles wrapped in canvas and hidden in root cellars. Money divided and cached in multiple locations. Land deeds given to Thomas for safekeeping because his white employer provided some protection. Preparation for loss, for fire, for forced evacuation. Sarah Whitcomb appeared carrying the school's record book. Student names, attendance, lessons completed. Her life's work documented in careful handwriting. Hide this, she said to Elias. If they burn the school again, I want proof it existed. Proof these children learned. Proof we built something. Elias took the book. Heavy with more than paper. They won't burn it again, he said. Sarah smiled sadly. You don't know that. No, but I'll die trying to prevent it. She touched his arm gently. That's what I'm afraid of. Mothers packed travel bundles, clothing, food, medicine, essentials for sudden flight. They did this quietly while children slept. protecting innocence for one more night. Old men sharpened tools that could serve as weapons if necessary. Axes, hammers, farming implements that had built lives now prepared to defend them. The community transformed, not into an army, into something harder to define. Citizens who refused to die quietly. Families who chose survival over submission. People who'd tasted freedom and wouldn't surrender it without cost. Near midnight, Caleb descended from watch position, face grim. "Scouts reporting," he said. Elias followed him outside. 3 young men waited. Fast runners who'd volunteered for reconnaissance. "Armed militia northeast," the first reported. "Maybe 40 riders. Stopped at the county line, making camp." "Southwest approach has 20 more," the second added. "Different group. No uniforms, but carrying rifles openly." The third scout hesitated. Federal troops pulled back. Lieutenant received orders. Moved camp 15 miles west. Puts them outside quick response distance. Elias processed the information. Militias positioning. Federal protection withdrawn. Timing deliberate. "How long until they move?" he asked. "Hard to say. Dawn, maybe. Could be sooner." Thomas appeared. "Just got word from my contact. Sheriff Pollard issued warrants this afternoon. 23 names, all soldiers from last night. Charges include assault, conspiracy, unlawful assembly, and inciting insurrection." "Let me guess," Caleb said. "He's deputizing militia to serve those warrants. 100 new deputies sworn in 2 hours ago. The pieces aligned. Legal cover established. Federal protection removed. Forces positioned. Everything prepared for overwhelming response disguised as law enforcement. Marcus joined them. This is it. This is how they crush us. Come at dawn with badges and warrants. Anyone resists gets killed legally. Anyone surrenders gets imprisoned or worse. Either way, we're destroyed." "How many?" Elias asked the scouts. "Combined? Maybe 150 armed men. Could be more gathering. 150 against 100. But those 100 included old men, wounded veterans, and fighters protecting families. Advantage numbers, advantage surprise, advantage legal authority, all theirs. "We need to decide," Thomas said quietly. "Right now. Fight, flee, or surrender. Because dawn is coming, and we're out of time." Dawn broke differently than expected. No militia charge, no warrant service, no gunfire splitting morning air. Instead, federal carriages rolled into town square, blue uniforms visible, officers dismounting with deliberate authority, the kind of presence that made people stop and stare. Elias watched from the church steps. Hadn't slept? None of them had. They'd prepared for battle through the night, positioned defenders, readied weapons, made peace with whatever morning brought. This wasn't what they'd prepared for. "That's a federal marshal," Thomas said, squinting. "Badge is different. Higher authority than regular troops." The marshal, tall, thin, gray-bearded, surveyed the square. 2 younger officers flanked him. Local whites gathered nervously. Sheriff Pollard emerged from his office, confusion evident. "Gentlemen," the marshal's voice carried, "I'm Marshal James Brennan, Federal Circuit. I'm here investigating reported violations of the Civil Rights Act and Enforcement Act, specifically allegations of conspiracy to deprive citizens of constitutional protections." Hope flickered. Dangerous hope. Sheriff Pollard approached. "Marshal Brennan, there's been misunderstanding." "No misunderstanding, Sheriff. I have testimony, documents, witness statements. Federal law is clear. I'm here to enforce it." The marshal gestured. His officers moved with precision, not toward the Black Quarter, toward white homes. "We're executing arrests," Brennan announced. "Anyone interfering will face federal charges." The first arrest happened at Miller's store. Deputy Carson dragged out struggling. Second at the telegraph office, clerk who'd been seen riding with the Ku Klux Klan. Third at Judge Griggs's residence, the judge himself, led out in handcuffs. The square erupted. White townspeople shouting, black families emerging cautiously, federal authority asserting itself in ways that seemed impossible yesterday. Elias descended church steps slowly, Caleb beside him, others following. "Is this real?" Caleb whispered. "Looks real." They watched Sheriff Pollard argue, face reddening. Marshal Brennan ignored him, pointed at 2 more deputies. "Those men are named in testimony. Arrest them." Federal officers moved. No hesitation, no negotiation. Clean, efficient, legally unassailable. By noon, 17 men sat in federal custody, loaded into wagons, charges read publicly, conspiracy to violate civil rights, assault under color of law, deprivation of constitutional protections, the legal language that made violence prosecutable. Marshal Brennan addressed the gathered crowd. "The United States government will not tolerate organized terror against its citizens. Reconstruction law applies here. Federal protection applies here. Anyone believing otherwise will learn differently in federal court." He looked directly at the Black Quarter. "You are citizens. You have rights. Those rights will be defended." The words hung in humid air. Too good to be true, too necessary to dismiss. Elias approached cautiously. "Marshal Brennan?" The marshal turned, studied him. "You're Carter, former sergeant. Led the defense 2 nights ago." "Yes, sir." "You showed remarkable restraint. Could have killed every one of those night riders. Didn't. That restraint saved lives and made my job easier. Clean self-defense. Textbook. Smart." Elias hadn't expected praise. "We protected our families. You protected your community while maintaining legal standing. That matters. Federal court will recognize the difference between self-defense and vigilantism. You stayed on the right side." Caleb stepped forward. "Will you stay? Ensure protection?" Brennan's expression tightened. "I'll remain through preliminary hearings. After that, federal troops will maintain presence. Not large numbers, but enough to discourage organized violence. The men arrested today were ringleaders. Remove them, and the structure collapses." "What about the sheriff?" Thomas asked. "Sheriff Pollard claims ignorance. Can't prove otherwise yet. He remains in position pending investigation, but he knows he's being watched. Not perfect, but something." The marshal departed mid-afternoon, left 2 officers and a dozen troops, promised return for trial. The arrested men would face federal court, not local justice. Real consequences instead of wrist slaps. Evening brought cautious gathering, not celebration. Too much uncertainty. But relief. Tension easing like fever breaking. Sarah Whitcomb reopened the school that afternoon. Symbolic. Children returned to lessons interrupted by violence. Parents watched from doorways, ready to react but hoping they wouldn't need to. Elias walked through the quarter as dusk approached. Noticed differences. Women working gardens without constantly watching roads. Old men sitting on porches without weapons hidden nearby. Children playing without fear, stopping their games. Not normal. Not yet. But closer. Caleb joined him. "You believe it?" "Want to believe it. That's not answer." Elias stopped walking. "Federal authority is real. Marshal Brennan is real. Arrests are real. But systems are complicated. Higher authority can be overruled. Orders can change. Protection can evaporate. So we stay ready. We stay ready." Isaiah prepared dinner for the leadership. Nothing fancy. Beans, cornbread, greens. But eating together felt significant, acknowledging survival, marking transition from crisis to something possibly better. They gathered in his small home, 12 men who'd coordinated defense now sitting around a table instead of planning battles. "Federal law worked," Marcus said quietly. "They came. They enforced rights. They arrested perpetrators. System functioned exactly as designed. This time," Caleb added, "under these circumstances, with these specific people. Doesn't guarantee next time." "But it proves possibility," Thomas countered. "Proves that legal protection isn't complete fantasy." Marshal Brennan responded to documentation. Testimony, evidence, rule of law functioned. Elias listened. Let them process. Both perspectives valid. Isaiah served food. Simple ritual of shared meal. Breaking bread with men who'd been ready to die together yesterday. What do we do now? Someone asked. We live, Elias said. We work. We rebuild what was burned. We teach our children. We stay organized, but we live. That's the victory. Continuing to exist. Continuing to build. Not letting terror steal our futures. And if they come again? Then we defend again. But maybe today taught them something. Maybe seeing their leaders arrested taught them that federal law has teeth. Maybe fear migrates. Sarah arrived carrying pie. Somehow found ingredients and time to bake. Offered it shyly. Thought you could use something sweet. The gesture broke remaining tension. Laughter emerged. Careful laughter. Exhausted laughter. But genuine. They ate Sarah's pie and talked about tomorrow. About crops needing planting. About school lessons needing teaching. About normal life that suddenly seemed achievable. Dusk deepened outside. Families lit lamps. Life continuing. Federal troops maintained visible patrol. Not oppressive, but present. Symbol that power had shifted, at least temporarily. Elias walked Sarah home after dinner. She moved with less tension than she'd carried for months. You think it's over? She asked. I think it's different. Different how? Different like maybe we forced change. Maybe federal attention means real protection. Maybe arresting 17 men broke their organization's spine. Sarah smiled. You almost sound hopeful. I am, carefully. But yes, she touched his arm. Same gesture as before, but lighter. Thank you for defending us, for staying disciplined, for giving us this moment of breathing. We defended ourselves. You led us. Don't diminish that. Elias returned home as full darkness fell. His small house still standing. His carpentry tools organized. His life intact. He sat on his porch and breathed evening air. Let himself feel something approaching peace. Maybe this was the turn. Maybe federal authority would hold. Maybe arrested leaders meant genuine consequences. Maybe the system could actually protect those it claimed to serve. Maybe. The rider came before dawn. Federal courier. Horse lathered. Urgent dispatch clutched tight. Elias woke to hoofbeats and watched from his window as the man dismounted at federal headquarters, the commandeered boarding house where troops were stationed. Lamplight flared inside. Voices rose. Movement through windows. Something wrong. Elias dressed quickly, walked toward the building. Others emerging from homes. Same instinct. Same recognition of disrupted patterns. Marshal Brennan appeared in the doorway, face tight, papers in hand. The two younger officers behind him looked uncomfortable. Gather your people, Brennan said quietly. Now. They assembled in pre-dawn darkness. Leadership first, then families. Growing crowd sensing shift in air. The way animals sense storms coming. Brennan faced them, gray beard catching lamplight. Man who'd seemed so certain yesterday now looked diminished. I've been recalled, he said. No preamble. Direct truth. Orders from Washington. Immediate return required. Investigation suspended pending administrative review. Silence absorbed the words. Processed implications. Administrative review? Caleb's voice cut sharp. What does that mean? It means someone higher up disagrees with my actions, believes I overstepped authority, requires reassessment of enforcement priorities. The arrests? Thomas asked. Being reconsidered. Charges may be modified or withdrawn pending review. The men in custody will be released to local jurisdiction until federal court determines appropriate action. Released to local jurisdiction. To Sheriff Pollard, who'd looked the other way during every attack. You're abandoning us, Caleb said flatly. Brennan's jaw worked. I'm following orders. I don't have choice. Everyone has choice. Not in military structure. Not when Washington issues direct commands. Elias stepped forward. How long until review completes? Months, maybe longer. Federal resources are stretched. Reconstruction enforcement isn't priority it was. Political winds shifting. So they get away with everything. Sarah's voice. Quiet devastation. I'm sorry. Brennan looked like he meant it. Didn't matter. Sorry changed nothing. Troops will withdraw by noon. I recommend continued vigilance. Document everything. Maintain records. Federal law still exists, even if enforcement is delayed. Delayed. Polite word for abandoned. The marshal departed before full sunrise. Took his officers. Took his authority. Took their hope. Federal troops lingered until midday. Packed equipment with practiced efficiency. Rolled out exactly on schedule. Professional withdrawal from promises made. Sheriff Pollard emerged shortly after. Stood in town square. Smiled. Well now, he said to no one particular. Seems federal government decided local matters should be handled locally. Imagine that. White townspeople gathered. Energy shifting. The arrests that seemed so permanent yesterday suddenly felt like bad dream. Power returning to familiar hands. By afternoon, the 17 arrested men walked free. No trial. No consequences. No federal protection standing between them and vengeance. They emerged from the jailhouse Pollard had kept them in. Brushed off clothes. Accepted congratulations. Judge Griggs shook hands like hosting party. Deputy Carson laughed loud enough to carry. The Black Quarter went silent. Shutters closed. Doors barred. Gardens abandoned midday. Everyone retreating into whatever shelter they could find. Elias gathered the men. Same church basement as before. Different weight in the air. Federal law failed, Marcus said. Completely. Absolutely. They arrested 17 men and released them all within 48 hours. Didn't fail, Isaiah corrected. Was betrayed. Someone in Washington decided we weren't worth protecting. Made deliberate choice to abandon enforcement. Difference doesn't matter, Caleb said. Result is same. We're alone. No higher authority coming. No legal protection existing. Just us and them. And now they're angry. Thomas paced. They'll retaliate. Humiliation demands response. They were arrested, paraded as criminals, threatened with federal consequences. Now they're free and furious. They'll need to reassert dominance. Violently. We prepare same as before, Elias started. For what? Caleb interrupted. Another night of defense? Another temporary victory that gets undone by political decisions we can't control? We can't sustain this. Can't fight indefinitely against entire system designed to crush us. So we surrender. I'm saying we face reality. Federal government won't save us. Local government wants us dead. Legal system is weapon pointed at our heads. What exactly are we preparing for except slow extermination? Movement outside stopped conversation. Running footsteps. Young voice shouting. They emerged into afternoon sun. Boy sprinting down street. They took old Moses. Sheriff took him. Elias's blood froze. Moses Carter, his uncle. 73 years old. Man who'd survived slavery, survived war, survived everything. Gentle elder who taught children and counseled patients. Where? Elias demanded. Square. There. The boy couldn't finish. Terror choking words. They ran. Full sprint through streets. Crowd already forming. White faces circling. Black faces frozen in horror. Moses hung from courthouse oak. Rope around neck. Sheriff Pollard standing beneath him. Judge Griggs watching. Deputy Carson holding the rope that had done the hauling. Not hooded riders in darkness. Not secretive violence. Public execution in daylight. Law itself wielding the noose. Moses's body turned slowly. Neck broken. Eyes open. Mouth slack. Man who'd preached forgiveness murdered by men wearing badges. Elias stopped. Couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. Stared at his uncle's corpse displayed like warning. Let that be lesson, Sheriff Pollard announced. loud enough to carry. Federal government left. This town belongs to us now. Anyone forgetting that will join him. Judge Griggs nodded approval. Legal authority rests with local jurisdiction. We determine order here. We determine consequences. The crowd parted as Elias approached, walked forward with mechanical steps, stood beneath his uncle's body, looked up at the face he'd known his entire life. Man who'd taught him letters, who'd survived overseer's whip, who'd counseled restraint even when Elias argued for action. Murdered by law itself. Sheriff Pollard smiled. Something you want to say, Carter? Elias turned, looked at the sheriff, at the judge, at the deputies, at the white townspeople watching with satisfaction, looked at the courthouse behind them, building representing justice, order, civilization, looked at his uncle hanging from its tree. Cut him down, Elias said quietly. Can't do that. Body stays until sunset. Warning needs time to sink in. Cut him down. Pollard's hand drifted toward his pistol. You giving me orders? Caleb appeared at Elias's shoulder. Then Isaiah, then Thomas, then others, forming line. Not threatening, just present. Witnessing. Pollard assessed numbers, smiled wider. Fine. Take your dead. Bury him quiet. Remember what happens when you forget your place. They cut Moses down gently, carried him away while white townspeople watched, returned to the church where hope had lived yesterday, laid the body carefully, cleaned his face, closed his eyes, performed rituals of grief while rage built in silence. Night fell. They gathered around Moses's body. The law killed him, Marcus said. Not criminals, not night riders. Law itself, sheriff, judge, legal authority murdering citizen in daylight and calling it justice. Federal system abandoned us, Isaiah added, recalled marshal, dropped charges, withdrew protection, left us to this. Caleb looked at Elias. What now? Elias stared at his uncle's face. Man who'd believed patience would win, who'd counseled faith in gradual progress, who died because mercy was mistaken for weakness. Law is the enemy, Elias said, voice flat, empty. Not just corrupt law, not just abused law, law itself, the entire system. Federal government that abandons enforcement, local government that weaponizes authority, courts that legitimize murder, all of it. Every piece. The law is the weapon killing us. Then what do we do? Someone asked. Elias looked around the room, at men who'd fought for country that wouldn't protect them, who'd believed in justice that didn't exist, who'd trusted systems designed to destroy them. We become something else, he said, something the law can't touch, because we stop asking permission, stop seeking protection, stop believing any system will save us. What does that mean? It means we architect our own justice. We dismantle the structure that murdered Moses. We stop being victims waiting for rescue. We become the force that ends this, completely, permanently, without mercy. Silence settled heavy. That's war, Caleb said quietly. War already exists. We're just finally recognizing it. They sat with Moses's body through the night, mourning him, mourning their faith in law and order, mourning the hope that died when federal carriages rolled away. The elders arrived near midnight. 7 men, oldest survivors, men who remembered slavery in detail that younger ones only knew as story, who carried scars on backs and souls that made war seem simple by comparison. They entered the church basement without announcement, moved slowly but deliberately. Age hadn't stolen their presence. Solomon Webb led them, 81 years old, back bent from decades of fieldwork under overseers who considered mercy weakness. He'd outlived 3 owners, survived sale that separated him from wife and children, walked to freedom when Union troops arrived, and never looked back. He approached Moses's body, stood silent, then spoke. Knew him 60 years, since we were both property, since before any of you were born. Good man, patient man. Believed time and righteousness would heal wounds. Believed mercy was strength. Solomon touched Moses' cold hand. He was wrong. The words settled like stone. Not wrong to hope. Not wrong to seek peace. Wrong to believe patience conquers evil. Wrong to think mercy changes hearts that profit from cruelty. Wrong to wait for justice from systems built on our backs. He turned to face the gathered men. I was 20 years old when Overseer broke my arm because I looked at him wrong. Bone healed crooked. Still aches when rain comes. You know what I learned? Pain doesn't teach oppressors anything. Only teaches victims how much they can endure. And endurance without resistance is just slow death. Another elder stepped forward. Nathaniel Price, 76. Missing 3 fingers from punishment he never spoke about. I believed in law once. Believed Emancipation Proclamation meant freedom. Believed Reconstruction meant justice. Believed federal government would enforce rights it claimed we possessed. I was fool. Law is just words on paper. Only means something if power backs it. And power abandoned us. Saw it happen before, said Jacob Reese, 74. Scars crossing his face from whipping that almost killed him. Different forms, same pattern. Masters promising better treatment if we worked harder. Overseers promising mercy if we obeyed completely. Owners promising freedom in their wills that never materialized. Always promises, never delivery. Because system profits from our suffering. Always has, always will, unless we break it. Elias listened, felt each word like hammer blow. These men had survived everything, had patience that younger generation couldn't imagine, had endured horrors that made Ku Klux Klan raids seem brief and simple, and they were saying patience failed. You fought in war, Solomon said, addressing the former soldiers, fought for country that enslaved you, believed victory would bring freedom. Did it? Truly? You have papers saying you're free. You have amendments saying you're citizens. You have laws saying you're equal. But Moses hangs from tree because sheriff decided his life was lesson. So tell me, what did that war actually win? Nobody answered. It won the right to fight the next war, Solomon continued. The war that never ended. The war that just changed uniforms. That's what you won. Not freedom, not justice. Just different battlefield with same enemy wearing badges instead of gray. Marcus shifted uncomfortably. What are you saying we should do? Whatever necessary. Without hesitation. Without mercy. Without believing any rule or law or authority will save you. Because it won't. It never has. It never will. The only protection you have is each other. And whatever force you can bring to bear. That's not civilization, someone protested weakly. No, Nathaniel agreed. It's not. Civilization is luxury, afforded to people who don't wake up wondering if today is the day they hang. Civilization is game played by people with power who occasionally let powerless pretend to participate. You want civilization, they do too. That's why they kill anyone threatening their version of it. So you have choice. Die civilized and patient like Moses, or survive by whatever means necessary. Jacob moved closer to Elias. You led men in war, led them through battles, where hesitation meant death. You know how to make hard decisions. You know how to do what's necessary even when it costs you. So lead now. Not toward peace. Not toward reconciliation, not toward patience. Lead toward survival. And survival means destroying everything threatening it. Elias looked at his uncle's body, thought about every lesson Moses had taught. Patience, forgiveness, faith, all the virtues that should have mattered, all the principles that got him killed. I don't know if I can, Elias said quietly. Becoming what they are. using their methods. That changes us, makes us something different. Maybe something worse. Something worse than what? Solomon challenged. Worse than victims? Worse than corpses? You afraid of what you might become if you fight without restraint? I'm afraid of what you'll become if you don't. Dead. Like Moses. Like every other patient, forgiving soul who believed mercy was enough. You want to honor him? Honor all of us, who survived by our teeth. Then survive, however you must. Whatever it costs. Caleb stood. They're right. We've been fighting like we still believe in rules, like some authority will intervene, like justice exists somewhere waiting to be claimed. But Moses showed us truth. Justice doesn't exist. It never did. There's only power. And they have all of it, until we take it. Taking it means becoming them, Thomas said. No, Isaiah corrected, means becoming what we need to be. They use violence to maintain oppression. We use violence to end it. That's not the same thing. Intent matters. Purpose matters. Does it? Elias asked. Does purpose change what we do? Does intent clean blood from hands? Nothing cleans blood from hands, Solomon said. Nothing cleanses necessary violence. But necessary is different than recreational. They kill for entertainment, for dominance, for profit. You kill for survival, for protection, for future, where your children don't hang from trees. That difference is everything. The elders surrounded Moses' body, formed circle. 7 men who'd survived hell by whatever means necessary, who'd endured because they did what survival demanded. We're dying, Solomon said. Soon, age taking what slavery couldn't. But before we go, we're telling you truth masters never wanted slaves to know. Truth owners beat out of us. Truth that only survival teaches. Mercy without power is suicide. Patience without action is death. Belief without force is prayer that goes unanswered. You want to live? You want your children to live? Then stop asking permission. Stop seeking justice from systems built to deny it. Stop being victims waiting for rescue. He placed his hand on Moses' cold forehead. This man was my friend, was good man, but his patience killed him. Learn from that. Learn that virtue without violence is just target. That righteousness without ruthlessness is grave marker. Elias felt something break inside, some final restraint, some last belief that honorable path existed. Moses' death had cracked it. The elders' words shattered it completely. What do we do? He asked. Not questioning, accepting. Whatever it takes, Solomon said simply. You dismantle the system, piece by piece, person by person. You make them understand that killing one of yours costs them more than they can afford. You become the terror they inflicted. You break them, completely. Caleb looked at Elias, waiting. Isaiah watched. Ready. Thomas stood. Committed. All 100 men present, all waiting. All understanding that the patient war had failed, that the righteous war had been abandoned, that only the ruthless war remained. Elias closed his eyes, saw his uncle's face, opened them, saw his future. We start at dawn, he said. Dawn broke cold. Mist hung low over the town like something waiting. Elias gathered his commanders in the church basement. Same room where they'd planned the first ambush. Different purpose now. No restraint, no mercy, no belief that stopping short of total destruction would bring anything but more nooses. 3 targets, Elias said. Spread crude map on table. Supply depot where militia arms are cached. Judge Griggs's estate where Ku Klux Klan organizes. Sheriff Pollard's house where planning happens. We hit all 3. Same night. Coordinated. No survivors to warn others. Survivors talk, Caleb said. Statement, not question. There won't be survivors. The words settled. Nobody flinched. That mercy had died with Moses. Isaiah, you take the depot. 12 men. Burn it. Anyone guarding it dies quiet. No noise until the building's already burning. By the time anyone responds, you're gone. Isaiah nodded. Former scout. Knew how to move through darkness, how to kill without sound. Thomas, the judge's estate. 20 men. He keeps Ku Klux Klan records there. Membership rolls, plans, evidence of who funds them. Burn everything. If he's there, he dies. If anyone else is there, they die. No witnesses. Thomas's jaw tightened, but he didn't argue. Understood necessity. Caleb, you and I take the sheriff's house. He lives alone. Widower. No servants. Just him and whatever deputies he trusts enough to meet at night. We wait. Watch. When they gather for their next planning session, we kill them all. Then we burn the house. What about patrols? Marcus asked. Militia's been walking streets at night. We kill the patrols first. Quiet. Quick. Bodies hidden until morning. By the time anyone realizes they're missing, the fires will be starting. Chaos will handle the rest. And after? Someone asked. When they retaliate? They won't. Because by the time they understand what happened, their leadership will be dead. Their weapons will be ash. Their organization will be headless. And they'll know, absolutely know, that continuing means extinction. Elias looked at each man. This isn't like before. We're not defending. We're not responding. We're not trying to scare them away. We're erasing them completely. Anyone participating in their system. Anyone profiting from their terror. Anyone protecting their violence. They all die. Tonight. Morning passed in careful preparation. Weapons cleaned, routes memorized, signals practiced, every man understanding his role, every man accepting what it required. No sermons, no prayers, no pretense that God sanctioned what they planned, just cold calculation, military precision. The same discipline that had won battles now directed toward different enemy. Night fell. Isaiah's team moved first. Midnight. Approached the supply depot from 3 directions. 2 guards standing watch. Former Confederate soldiers now deputized as militia. Believed themselves safe. Believed black folks too scared to resist. Isaiah slit the first guard's throat from behind. Covered his mouth. Let him bleed out silent. Second guard turned at the wet sound. Opened mouth to shout. Caleb's man drove knife through his throat. Twisted. Withdrew. Caught body as it fell. Both corpses dragged into shadows. Isaiah's team entered the depot. Found it exactly as described. Rifles stacked in rows. Ammunition crated. Powder kegs stored carelessly against walls. Pour it, Isaiah whispered. They spread lamp oil methodically. Soaked everything. Trails leading to door. Powder kegs positioned to maximize explosion. Out, Isaiah ordered. They withdrew. Left one man with torch. Waiting. 3 blocks away, Thomas's team surrounded Judge Griggs's estate. Large house, columned porch, symbol of power built on stolen labor. Inside, lights burned in second-floor study. Meeting happening. Voices carrying through windows. Thomas counted 5 distinct speakers. Griggs, 3 militia leaders. One stranger whose accent marked him as from the state capital. State support. State funding. State organization. Exactly what they'd suspected. Thomas's men doused the ground floor with oil, while their targets planned upstairs. Soaked walls. Poured trails through servants' quarters. Positioned men at every exit. When they run, Thomas whispered, cut them down. At Sheriff Pollard's house, Elias and Caleb watched from across the street. Small house, modest for his position, but maps visible through windows showed its real purpose. Command center, planning room, heart of coordination between law and terror. 4 men inside besides Pollard. Deputies, all armed, all confident. Caleb checked his pistol. How do we do this? Front and back simultaneously, fast. Anyone armed dies immediately. We don't talk. Don't explain. Don't give them chance to surrender. And Pollard? Last. I want him to understand why. 2 a.m. arrived. Prearranged time. Coordinated by church bells that hadn't rung since the Ku Klux Klan's first raid. Now they rang once, single toll. Signal. Isaiah's man touched torch to oil trail. Fire raced into depot. Found powder kegs. Explosion shattered midnight. Orange bloom lighting sky. Windows shattering blocks away. Building collapsing into inferno. Same moment, Thomas's men threw torches onto Griggs's oil-soaked porch. Fire caught instantly. Climbed walls. Consumed ground floor before anyone inside understood what happened. Shouts upstairs. Running feet. Men racing toward stairs. Finding them already burning, they turned toward windows. Jumped. Fell into waiting guns. Thomas's men fired point blank. Methodical. Efficient. Each target dropping before hitting ground. Griggs appeared at second-floor window. Saw his men dead. Saw his house burning. Saw Thomas standing in firelight. "Please!" Griggs shouted. "Please! I have money! I have—" Bullet took him in chest. Second in head. Body tumbled from window. No speeches, no justice. Just physics and finality. At Pollard's house, Elias and Caleb moved. Front door kicked open. Back door simultaneously breached. Deputies spun toward sounds, reaching for weapons, never reaching them. Caleb's team fired first. Close range. Devastating. 2 deputies down before understanding danger. Elias shot the third through throat as he raised rifle. Fourth took bullet in chest. Fell backward. Tried crawling toward pistol. Caleb stepped on his hand. Fired once. Stopped the crawling. Pollard stood frozen. Badge on chest. Symbol of law that had sanctioned every murder, every beating, every terror. "You," he whispered. Recognized Elias. "You won. Federal troops praised you. Why—" "Moses Carter," Elias said. "My uncle. You lynched him yesterday. That was legal. Legally deputized citizens carrying out—" "Legal." Elias repeated the word like tasting poison. "You made it legal. You wrote the laws. You enforced them. You protected the Ku Klux Klan and called it order. You hung my uncle and called it justice. I was following—" "No." Elias raised pistol. "You were leading. You chose this. Every raid. Every burning. Every murder. You chose it. Sanctioned it. Made it possible." Pollard looked at the badge on his chest. Then at Elias's gun. Understanding finally arriving. "You're no better than—" Elias fired. Once. Center mass. Watched Pollard fall. Watched him bleed. "No," Elias said to the corpse. "We're exactly what you made us. What you forced us to become. What your law demanded for survival." They burned Pollard's house. Burned his maps. Burned his records. Burned every piece of evidence that law had coordinated with terror. By 3 a.m., 3 fires lit the night, smoke visible for miles, chaos spreading as townsfolk woke to orange sky and distant screams. Militia members rushed toward fires, found burned buildings, found bodies, found nothing to fight. No enemy to engage, just destruction already complete. Dawn arrived slowly, sun rising on fundamentally changed town. The supply depot, collapsed ruins still smoking, both guards dead, all weapons destroyed. Judge Griggs's estate, burned foundation, 5 corpses scattered in yard. Ku Klux Klan records ash. Sheriff Pollard's house, blackened skeleton. 5 bodies inside. Command structure eliminated. And the militia. Armed men standing in streets holding weapons they suddenly understood were useless. Because leadership was dead. Because plans were burned. Because the enemy they'd terrorized had become something they couldn't fight. Not because of numbers. Because of will. Because one night of calculated violence had destroyed organization that took months to build. By sunrise, something had shifted. White faces that had shown confidence now showed fear. Black faces that had shown submission now showed nothing, just watched, waited. The Ku Klux Klan didn't ride that night, or the next, or ever again. 5 years passed. The town didn't transform overnight. Change came slowly, carefully, like water wearing stone through persistence rather than force. But it came. New Hope Church stood rebuilt, larger than before, white paint fresh, bell tower restored. Every Sunday it rang clear across town. No one stopped the sound anymore. School opened in the building's eastern wing. Sarah Whitcomb taught there. Back straight, voice steady, teaching children who'd been born into freedom but needed education to keep it. 20 students sat in rows, ages 6 to 14, learning letters, learning numbers, learning history their parents couldn't read but remembered living. No one burned the school. No riders came at night. No threats arrived, because everyone remembered what happened to those who'd tried before. Elias Carter walked past the school most mornings, carpenter still, hands scarred from work and war both, hair graying at temples now, lines deeper around eyes, body moving slower than it had 5 years ago. But moving. He'd built the school's desks himself, made them sturdy, made them to last. Same way he'd helped rebuild homes after that night. Same way he'd constructed life from ruins before. Children's voices carried through windows, reciting lessons. Young voices holding no memory of smoke or blood or terror. Growing up in world their parents had built through means they'd never need to know completely. Elias paused outside, listened. Sarah's voice explaining multiplication. Students responding. Normal sounds. Ordinary sounds. Sounds that had cost everything to make possible. "Morning, Elias," Thomas Reed called from across the street. Ran a store now. Sold dry goods. Fair prices. Served everyone. No one questioned it anymore. "Morning," Elias replied. They didn't discuss that night. Never had. Never would. Some things lived better in silence than speech. Isaiah Bell operated a freight business, moved goods between towns, built reputation for reliability, hired young men, taught them trade, taught them other things too, though never explicitly. Just showed them how to stand, how to move, how to carry themselves like men who'd earned their space in world. Caleb Moore farmed land he'd bought 3 years ago. Small plot, but his. Legal title. Deed recorded. No one contested ownership. He grew tobacco, sold crops, saved money, talked about buying adjacent property. Marcus Webb had died 2 years back. Natural causes, age and hard living catching up. They'd buried him in cemetery behind New Hope. Headstone marked veteran. No one defaced it. The other 96 men lived similar lives, worked, raised families, aged into something resembling peace, but they all carried it. That night, those choices, that knowledge of what they'd done and why they'd done it, carried it quiet, carried it careful, carried it like ammunition kept dry but ready, because the world hadn't changed completely, just locally, just enough, just in ways that let children walk to school without fear. Elias continued his walk. Route took him past where Sheriff Pollard's house had stood. Empty lot now, no one built there. Ground stayed bare. Town consensus without discussion. Some spaces marked by absence. Judge Griggs's estate had been sold. Northern family bought it. Didn't know its history. Rebuilt. Painted different colors. Tried erasing what had happened. But everyone who'd lived through it remembered. Couldn't forget, even if they wanted to. The supply depot never reopened. Ruins cleared eventually, but no new depot built. Militia had dissolved after that night. Federal troops withdrawn during Reconstruction's collapse. But here, in this specific town, no new terror organization formed. Not because of law, because of memory. Because everyone understood what happened when power tried reclaiming its comfortable violence. Everyone remembered fires, bodies, Sudden, complete destruction of structure that had seemed permanent. White townspeople who'd supported the Ku Klux Klan lived quieter now, kept opinions private, made no moves toward organization. Fear had migrated, settled into their homes instead. Not justice, not reconciliation, just deterrence through demonstrated capacity for total response. Elias reached his workshop, small building behind his house, smelled of sawdust and oil. Tools hung precisely on walls, everything ordered, everything maintained. He'd built furniture for half the town over 5 years. Tables, chairs, cabinets, cradles for newborns, coffins for dead. Life's bookends crafted by same hands that had killed men 5 years ago. No contradiction in that. Just reality. Just survival requiring multiple skills. He ran hands over current project. Rocking chair. Commissioned by young couple expecting first child. Simple design. Sturdy construction. Would last generations if maintained properly. Same principles applied everywhere. Build strong. Build careful. Build to last. Whether furniture or freedom. Door opened. Caleb entered. Carried wrapped bundle. Brought lunch, Caleb said. Wife insisted. Says you're getting too thin. Elias smiled slightly. Tell her thank you. They ate together in comfortable silence. Bread, cheese, apples from Caleb's orchard. Simple meal shared between men who'd seen hell together and somehow found way through. School's doing well, Caleb finally said. It is. Marcus's grandson started this year. Smart boy. Sarah says he's natural with numbers. Good. More silence. Then Caleb spoke again. Quieter. You ever regret it? Elias considered. Long moment, honest consideration. No, he said finally. We did what was necessary, what we'd been forced to become capable of, what the world demanded for survival. Federal government eventually abandoned us anyway. Reconstruction ended. Protections withdrawn. We could have waited, could have tried patience, and died patient, or watched our children die patient, or our grandchildren. Elias shook his head. Patience is luxury of those who can afford waiting. We couldn't. Caleb nodded, understanding completely, having lived same truth. They teach the children about the war, Caleb said, about freedom, about how slavery ended, but not how freedom was kept. No. Not that. Because some lessons couldn't be taught in schools. Some knowledge passed differently, through silence, through example, through fathers teaching sons how to stand, how to defend, how to refuse surrender. They finished eating. Caleb left. Elias returned to work, rocking chair taking shape under skilled hands. Outside, children walked home from school, laughing, playing, carrying books, existing in space their parents had created through means that never appeared in history books. Elias watched them through window, young faces unmarked by trauma, growing into world that felt normal to them, safe to them. World built on night of fire and blood 5 years ago, built on choice to become what survival demanded, built on refusal to wait for justice that would never arrive through proper channels. Because justice was never granted. Not to people like them. Not in world like this. It was only taken, seized, claimed through force when all other options proved empty promises. And sometimes, not often, but sometimes, that was enough. Not redemption, not righteousness, not vindication, just survival, just space. Just chance for children to grow up without learning to flinch at hoofbeats in darkness. Elias returned to his work, wood smooth under calloused hands, building something that would last, something that would hold new life safely. Same as always, same as everything. Building future one piece at a time, with whatever tools violence and necessity had left him. I hope you found that story powerful. Leave a like on the video and subscribe so that you do not miss out on the next one. I have handpicked 2 stories for you that are even more powerful. Have a great day.